Only days after the assault on Paris, many questions still remain about the attacks. And it's not only raising questions about security in France, but here in Canada, too. Some reports suggest one of the attackers posed as a refugee to get into Europe from Syria. That has a lot of Canadians questioning Ottawa's pledge to bring in 25,000 refugees in the next 45 days. Joining us now is Riza Hazmath, a political scientist professor at the University of Alberta. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So your expertise covers a lot of ground. Why don't we start in particular with the policy? There are calls we saw from Saskatchewan Premier Bradwell yesterday to slow down. Do you think, in your expertise, the Prime Minister should put the brakes on this a little bit?
When we actually look at the process for coming to Canada, I think we have a great sort of system in place to actually weed out potential security threats. So for starters, the UNHCR is going to be identifying particular refugees who are going to come to Canada. Then we're going to have the RCMP and CSIS and our Border Protection Services actually going through each individual. So we really have no security threat to the Canadian, in the Canadian context.
So with all those things in place, you identified the UN, the RCMP and CSIS. It's quite a few layers.
Exactly.
How much time does that take? Do we have time to process 25,000 refugees in 45 days?
Well, the government is actually beefing up its capacity to do this. So there should be absolutely no worry on that front.
So some of what we've seen, we've heard about stolen passports, that sort of thing. But how much of what we're hearing is perhaps reactionary in the aftermath of what we've seen in Paris?
Well, we are searching for answers, and part of it might be reactionary, but we need to get more facts in order to really understand the situation at hand.
Get more facts in terms of perhaps who these people were or who the refugees themselves would be?
It'll be more about who these people actually were, who actually committed these attacks.
Is that a thing that in your work that you have seen happens, is that we do sort of strike out like that? We look for immediate answers like that?
Well, it is something that, we do definitely look for immediate answers, but I think we need to take a more holistic approach to this process.
So as a population, as we're searching to understand what's happened in Paris and also looking to absorb 25,000 new people into Canada, what are some of the things that we can do then to help us understand?
Well, partially we need to understand what's actually going on in Syria. What we're seeing in Syria, we have about nearly 5 million displaced refugees. And so as a consequence, we're playing a very small role in bringing some of these refugees populations to Canada. And I think that's a sort of humanitarian sort of perspective we want to look at.
And as Canadians, we see ourselves as peacekeepers. We see ourselves as humanitarians. Have you seen some of that change over time, though?
Look, for the Canadian context, there's two things we need to look at. Of course, there's a long record of humanitarian action, but also how is it in part of our national security interest to do so? By having more refugees staying in Syria, it actually plays a very negative role in the long run for us, because the longer they're there, the greater chances they can be radicalized by forces such as ISIL.
So the world could be a safer place if countries like ours accept more people from places like Syria.
Indeed.
And once those people are here, what are some of the things that governments and regular citizens will be looking at in terms of getting them settled for the best possible outcomes?
It's a very tricky question. It really depends on the sort of demographics of those who are coming in. So what is their education? What's their age of migration and so forth? But generally speaking, we have to concentrate on the second generation and beyond and try to see how we can integrate them into our communities.
So second generation, meaning the parents come here,
right.
Hopefully everybody gets settled, and then once the children are born, then that's our second generation
Exactly.
that gets absorbed into Canadian society?
Exactly.
Anything that you would advocate for our viewers at home if they're listening, just to think about in terms of as we all grapple with this huge issue?
Look, we really need to look at why we're doing this. It's not only humanitarian action, it's also because it is a massive security risk to us in the long run. So there's a reason why Canada is trying to, fulfill our commitments in this particular action. Security
risk in terms of, as you said before, leaving refugees in a context like Syria, where we've seen the civil war, we've seen all the displaced millions.
Exactly.
All right, Doctor, thanks so much for being here with your insight this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you.